live.
And I think we are live. So that means... This is the Action Cast, the only podcast where all disputes are settled with giant fighting robots. And now, our feature presentation. Okay, and hi everybody. It's the Action Cast.
Hey,
Hello.
buddy.
How you doing, everybody? I'm Joe Drilling, and with me this month is Bryce Wilson. He's on the... Oh, now Ethan. Let's switch to Ethan. Bryce. Ethan. Right? Okay. Bryce Wilson.
There we go.
Ethan Chang.
Oh, do you have it switching from person to person?
It switches to whoever talks unless it's me because I'm hosting, so I have to click on myself if I'm gonna go on a filibuster. If I'm gonna be filibustering daddy, then I gotta click on myself. But everybody else,
Why do I feel like clicking on yourself is just a big old euphemism?
Cheers. Yeah. And Anthony Rogers, who is represented today by a blue silhouette.
Not that big of a euphemism.
No, it's really not.
I mean, let's face it, that is exactly what we're doing on this podcast, essentially. So,
True.
You know.
True. So we're well, you know what? Let's just do the thing and let's go ahead and start with some action because there's at least a couple of pieces of action movie news. So
Are there? I was under the assumption that all film had been canceled for the entire future.
I mean, it
There
kind
are
of
no more
has.
movies.
It kind of has. I don't play the sound clip anyways, so. I should get a video to go with
Are
this,
we not going to
really.
hear the sound?
This
You're
is
not here.
Media Break. You give us 3
that
minutes,
was a
and we'll give
fantastic
you the
sound.
world.
Man,
Is it over now?
It's over now, yeah. We should.
Rest in peace to action hero Jerry Stiller.
It's funny. I couldn't think of any action movies he was in, but I mean, pour one out for Jerry Stiller for sure. I was actually going to say rest in peace, Little Richard, if for no other reason than
what?
for providing.
This is what I get for going out in like the backcountry and riding my bike for 3 days. Is that I did not hear that Little Richard died.
Yeah, man.
That's right.
That was my real-time reaction to Little Richard dying.
Yeah.
He was a teacher. He taught Paul McCartney to go woo.
I believe it.
Prince
believe
yelled
it.
at him. So this is a deep Simpsons cut for those of you in the know.
I just know for sure if it wasn't for Little Richard, he was a teacher. He taught me that Long Tall Sally, she built for speed. She got everything that Uncle John need. Oh baby, yeah, baby.
And at this point, just because the original name was Tutti Frutti Young Booty, so it was a man ahead of his time.
Yeah,
And of his
absolutely,
time.
absolutely,
And of all time.
yeah, for sure. So pouring out for Little Richard and his contribution to one of the finest action films of the 1980s, which makes it one of the finest action films of all time. A film that Ethan, I think, famously theorized was all about dicks. Predator.
What movie is not all about dicks?
I mean, that's a valid. The ones that are all about vaginas, I think.
That's true.
The one that we're gonna watch tonight certainly qualifies.
Definitely qualifies, I think.
I'm interested in some theories that you guys have of what this movie is about.
Well, I only have really one theory, and it's a theory of dysfunction, but we'll get to that later. So
Yeah, Bryce is familiar with this screenwriter in a way that I was not. I found out when we watched.
Do we have any other news?
I don't know that well, wait, did we already talk about Sam Raimi directing Doctor
did.
Strange 2? We did talk about that
came
last
up
month.
for Darkman, yeah.
Oh, that came up for Darkman. That's how, as we enter year 4 of quarantine, I've lost track of time.
It will never end.
So,
Anyway,
yeah.
I kind of almost feel bad that we did this for the Stuart Gordon tribute, because Stuart Gordon is a wonderful filmmaker and he deserves tribute. But I almost feel that this movie is more of a Joe Haldeman film than a Stuart Gordon film. And I'll just say this, that and this is I'm exhausted right now, so this might be the only thing I say for the whole episode. But anyway, Joe Haldeman
I think we should introduce the movie before you.
Okay,
We
yeah,
watched
fair enough. Go,
Robot
you-
Jocks.
I'm getting ahead of myself. We
Yes.
watched Robot Jocks.
We watched Robot
Stuart
Jocks.
Gordon's Robot Jocks.
Yeah, Stuart
With an
Gordon.
X.
Yes, as we talked about in last month's Action Cast Action Movie Action Break, Stuart Gordon died recently. And he only directed, I think, 2 movies that we could sort of charitably call action films, which are Robot Jocks and Fortress. And I know Bryce watched both. I planned to watch Fortress, and I didn't have time, unfortunately. So I only watched Robot Jocks. But those are really the only 2 movies that we could charitably call action films in Stuart Gordon's filmography. I would love an excuse to just talk about Reanimator, but that's a hard sell for the Action Cast, I think.
We'll
So
wait for the October episode.
yeah.
We've made harder sells, but
Have we then Reanimator? Reanimator is not at all a horror film. Sorry, not at all an action film.
I was gonna say.
We usually did a horror film for Halloween.
For Halloween.
We
every year,
did
as far
12
as I remember.
monkeys, and like literally one gun is fired. in that.
12 Monkeys, I think, is more of an action film than.
Oh no,
Then
no, I think I
Reanimator.
disagree there, because Reanimator has way more set pieces than 12 Monkeys does.
I mean, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. Let's not go down this
That was the
particular
before times. This is the
rabbit
new
hole.
Action cast.
Yeah, this is Action Cast Season 2, baby. So, now that we've established to anybody who's watching this what film we're actually talking about,
Yeah.
proceed
Sorry,
with
no,
your...
it's-
Proceed,
it's,
Bryce.
It's not an action cast without a clusterfuck.
No, that's
So,
true. Never... That's true.
Anyways, so Joe Haldeman wrote this book called The Forever War back in the 70s, and it's really interesting in like the history of military sci-fi, because like going up on the soapbox for a bit, like most military sci-fi is, I don't want to say bad, but like there's just a jingoism inherent in it. You know,
Right.
even,
Like, most of it
something
is like the guy who wrote Starship Troopers that Verhoeven
Right,
was
the
basically
Heinlein,
dunking
like,
on.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
Heinlein.
The
Yeah.
Heinlein thing, yeah. And like even stuff that's, I feel like it's the whole Francois Truffaut conundrum where you can't make an anti-war film because any film will make war look exciting. It's kind of the same thing. So even, and like I know there's kettle of fish you can get into here, but like Ender's Game, which is, you know, basically a novel about like a lot of different stuff, but you know, more people came out of, I will guarantee you that more people have read Ender's Game and be like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool to go to battle school, than went, oh man, genocide is bad. Like, you know, and even something like John Scalzi's Old Man War, which, you know, is like very much a direct response to Heinlein and stuff like that. It's still an exciting, fun military sci-fi to read. You know, back to James Cameron. Everyone likes a bug hunt. Aside, like, and I'm sure people will throw out other titles, but I'll say that The Forever War is maybe the only truly successful anti-war sci-fi novel ever written, because it doesn't even take the stance that war is hell or war is this big traumatic thing that you'll never get over. Its standpoint is basically war is stupid. Like, it is just the dumbest thing you can do. And like, so even though you have all these cool military sci-fi weapons, it's just basically the stupid clusterfuck that wastes everyone's resources and everyone's time. And like, I'm not going to give away the ending of the book, but essentially the ending of the book comes down to, well, this was just a colossal waste of time. This was a colossal waste of literally thousands of years and like, you know, unthinkable amounts of resources, and it was all for nothing, and it was all fucking stupid. And the reason is that...
Sorry, he wrote
he
this
was an actual
book
Vietnam...
prior to
in the
this,
70s.
the writing the screenplay to this film, then.
Yes. This book was the one that made his reputation, and he was an actual Vietnam War veteran, and it's a very Vietnam book. And like beyond this, so it's, I mean, it's obviously written by someone who's actually fought, because of like the tactics and stuff like that. But it's like, it almost works more as satire than as a war novel, because like I said, the underlying element is like, this is just dumb. Everything about this is dumb. And you know, it's very much of the Vietnam era, because he keeps like going back, you know, to Earth society, and first everything just sucks, and then obviously all the social structures are different, and then like eventually humanity starts like evolving down an actual different evolutionary tree. and so it's like I said, it's extremely a novel of the Vietnam era, both in its the idea of like going off to war and coming back and being totally alienated from society, and war just being a colossal waste of resources, and just everything about it is just like, this is the dumbest thing we could possibly do. And what I love about Robot Jocks is it keeps trying to get at those points. Like, it is recognizably the work of the same person who wrote the Forever War, except it's like just handcuffed to this dumber than a bag of hammers story that like both the screenplay and Gordon have to keep trying to get to work, and it never gets any less stupid, any of it.
Right.
And it just, but like a lot of like the stuff that comes up in the Forever War, like the the eugenic stuff, the forced gender neutrality, the idea that they that every time they go back to like the peacetime world, like it's just shit because all the resources are going into war. Like, that's all in the Forever War, but it's at the surface of this just incredibly dumb robot fighting film that does not work at all. And
Right.
This movie's like,
it's a fascinating mismatch.
this is like, the movie's like, we have 15 ideas, and we have 20 scenes to convey those ideas in, and we also have 45 cents about.
Well, we have 45 cents left over after we paid for the robots to punch each other, because that stuff is pretty good.
In extreme slow motion.
Yes, but I mean, think about how fast would a giant robot really move?
Yeah.
I mean,
So I think that the word that I used during the action screening of this was that the film is cheap without looking inexpensive, and that is quite a feat. So it both does not look very good, and it also looks like it costs a shit ton of money. And I don't know how you do that, but there you go.
yeah, it's something. So famously, I think Charlie Band, who produced, so Charles Band was the owner of Wizard Films back in the day, who they were a horror imprint for VHS mostly, and also somewhat famously commissioned and published the Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre Atari 2600 video games. And when Wizard Video went tits up, then Charlie Band became the owner of Empire Pictures, and when Empire shit the bed, then he became the owner of Full Moon, which he is still the owner of today. And sort of infamously, he follows one of the great Poverty Row traditions, which is he will often get a poster made or draw a poster, have somebody do a poster, and then ask somebody to make a film around the poster. And this feels like that. Like, he had a poster with these two robots on it, and he was like, "Hey, Stuart, make me a movie." And like, that was, and Stuart called his buddy, the author who wrote the Forever War, whose name I don't remember already, and they hatched this together. Stuart Gordon, somewhat famously now, I think, was, I believe he was either kicked out or could not afford to finish at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and ended up being a pretty significant force in Chicago theater, and in fact did a lot of work with people like David Mamet and John Malkovich, and these Joe Mantegna, and these sort of the sort of 80s, 70s, 80s Chicago theater. I don't want to go so far as to say avant-garde, but sort of the new wave of the kind of live theater stuff that was coming out in the 70s and 80s with, again, David Mamet. If you're thinking of playwrights, David Mamet would probably be the first one, that you would think of, who, for anybody who doesn't know, wrote Glengarry Glen Ross, and he wrote the play that the movie About Last Night was based on. He wrote the movie Edmund with William H. Macy, which is sort of about a directionless male rage. He wrote a lot of things. His dialogue is fantastic. He writes dialogue in a way that's,
for the action cast, did both the scripts for The Untouchable and Ronin. So
yes, right. I always forget he wrote The Untouchables with Costner, but yeah. Yep, absolutely. So Stuart Gordon was a theater guy who kind of fell into movies and ended up doing a lot of work with Charles Band, and by all accounts really enjoyed his time at Empire and Full Moon, just doing kind of almost whatever he wanted. So this feels like that. Like he got a little bit of money from Charlie Band and was like, "Fuck it, man, we're doing giant robots."
I'm glad that the decent. So I didn't know who Stuart Gordon was or any of these people were, and I was worried as I was watching the movie that I was going in like at a disadvantage because maybe I would be like as I'm sitting there watching it, I was thinking like I have no idea what the fuck is going on in this movie. Nothing in this movie means anything. So in a way I'm glad that you've got all this context, but it's about who these people are and what their lives were like and careers were like, and it has nothing to do with this movie actually meaning anything. So maybe I didn't miss anything. Maybe it really is completely meaningless.
I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed Alex didn't show up, so you can all cross that off the list of things you never thought I'd say.
All right.
But apparently, this film shares certain parallels with the G Gundam series, and I have never made it through a single season of any of the Gundams, so I can either confirm or deny this. But I would just love if the plot of Robot Jocks evolved twice under two completely separate, evolutionary tracks. That would just be.
I have not seen it either, but I have been sent pictures from Alex. I believe that is the one that has a bunch of racist caricatures made into giant robots.
Wow.
So like, I think like the robot from Mexico has a giant sombrero. I think.
Wow.
Like stuff like that. Yeah, that level. So this movie didn't quite reach those heights.
So
it did not, but the basic premise.
Perhaps we should talk about describing. Oh, sorry, Joe. I was going to say perhaps we should describe the premise of the film.
Yeah, the basic premise of the movie is that somehow in the future war is outlawed, which doesn't. I don't. That was. If you buy into that, then the rest of the movie isn't that hard to buy into. But for me, that was like a bit of a hurdle to get over. I
can kind of buy into this because when you think of like the time period this film was made in, the big fear was mutually assured destruction. So I think you can see this idea where, and frankly, proxy wars happen now, so it's not too hard for me to
right,
buy
but war isn't outlawed now, right? There are still wars that are,
But I don't see it that hard to believe that like at some point the nuclear powers become so overpowered that they would agree to proxy war. I mean, maybe hard to believe is the wrong term, but like I'm willing to give it that suspension of disbelief.
Sure. Well, I mean, the premise, the voiceover narration, the brief voiceover narration at the beginning of the movie does tell us that there was a massive nuclear war, and after that, every country on Earth was just like, "We're not doing this. We're gonna have robot boxing matches to settle all international disputes now."
That sequence with the voiceover was, I thought, unquestionably the best sequence in the movie. And it's really cruel that it did that to me, that it started with like this like atmospheric setting and these fairly cool titles and like a moody voiceover. Like, this might actually be pretty good.
Surprise.
Yeah. Sorry, but it's I mean, like you said, from a premise standpoint, the premise is interesting. This idea that we don't fight wars anymore because, sort of as Bryce alluded to with this author's previous work, like, we've come to understand that they're a stupid waste of time. So instead, we just have two pilots pilot giant robots in front of live audiences for some reason.
He also seems to be saying that this is also a stupid waste of time. I mean, and spoiler alert, like the last shot of the film is basically, wow, what a stupid waste of time this was. And, obviously, like when Ajax, when Achilles goes back to America, everything's so resource poor because everyone's like spending their national budget on these giant ass robots. Like,
so it's 2020 is what you're saying,
because, right? So the fundamental message of the film is the same, which is, boy, this is fucking stupid. But then it also has to all of a sudden, like, instead of the forever war, which then is us fighting this alien race in these like cold, distant moons that no one really cares about, and then a bunch of people die. It suddenly has to like switch gears and be like, "Oh, look at these cool ass robots fight," and like it's funny. It's like this schizophrenic feel that both makes the film interesting and also makes it never quite work.
You can't like your theme can't be like the de-glorification of war, and then you have a penis chainsaw. You can't put things in the same fiction.
Yeah, I mean you're right. You're right.
I mean, well, you're right. You're also wrong. It would just have to go like way further than it does. So
Well, okay, that's
that was the dark joke.
Fair counterpoint. I think that the like this movie wants to have something to say, especially based on what Bryce tells me of the guy who wrote the screenplay, and knowing what I know of Stuart Gordon's history in the theater, but also like at the same time, it's a cheapy genre film that did get a theatrical release, but it came out in the summer of 1989, which was one of the most ridiculously overstuffed blockbuster summers in the history of cinema.
We were reading that it was just brutal, the lineup. I can't imagine going to this.
Well, Batman was like the big one, right?
Yeah, Batman was the big one. Indiana Jones: Last Crusade. I think RoboCop 2 or 3 was in the mix. I mean, it was just, you'd have to look at Back to the Future 2. Like, it's just, there's all these huge movies that came out.
I like to think that there's somebody who saw all of those that summer and then went to this and had the same thought Ethan did at the start, where the opening happens and they're like, oh shit, this one's going to blow them all out of the water.
Yeah.
Or just, you know what, or someone, this was their favorite. Just,
right, there's that too, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Their beloved robot jocks.
Yeah. So
if you are that person, please write us at the Action Cast.
The Abyss came out that year.
Email.com.
Now that I'm looking back at this, it maybe wasn't that great. Do the right thing. Do you think someone saw Do the Right Thing and Robot Jocks back to back?
It's a good double feature.
That's a good. Yeah, that seems like a good. Well, one of those movies has ideas, and one of those movies wants to have ideas. This movie wants to have ideas. And I mean, there's interesting stuff even in the background. Like we were sort of saying like, oh, it's 2020 and all the scenes of the crowds and the people outside all wearing face masks as they walk around, indicating that either there's, rampant disease or the air quality is so bad that you have to wear a dust mask all the time. But it never...
I would say all the interesting stuff is happening in the background, unfortunately. And I just want to say that like, I mean, I feel kind of bad that we picked this movie for our Stuart Gordon tribute, because, like, let me reiterate that Stuart Gordon was an extremely talented filmmaker and made some, like, wonderful films that are some of my favorites. And it's a shame that we picked one that just fundamentally does not work.
Yeah, I watched Castle Freak for the first time last year. And I had always been under the impression that, it was a full moon feature, and I don't put a great deal of stock into Full Moon. They're sort of like, we have more money maybe, but we're not quite as fun as Troma is. Like, that's what Full Moon's brand seems to be. And I think there was a time when they represented a slightly high, like the first Puppet Master and some stuff like that. But, Castle Freak was one that it never really appealed to me. And I saw it recently, like I said, about last year. And I was like, this movie is surprisingly good. Like, for a movie about, like, a freaky dude chained up in a castle and then a family moves in and, like, freaky dude in the castle gets out. Like, I was like, this movie is better than the premise would lead you to believe. Helped a great deal by, Jeffrey Combs is the father, and Barbara Crampton is the mother, and so that they're very strong performances stronger than this movie has in any of the roles. So
our good friend Eric, who couldn't make this, did say he wants to note that Gordon Combs is every bit as classic and important as other actor-director combos like Scorsese, De Niro, Bergman's, Siedow, etc.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. Jeffrey Combs, like a Castle Freak, Reanimator.
He ate his head like a gingerbread man.
Combs is the main character, the
No,
The
he's
cut on
all he
his
shows
forehead
up
guy?
as the gambler in this one.
He's
Yeah,
When
he-
he did first gambler.
All right.
Yeah, he is the reanimate. He plays the reanimator in Reanimator. That's
Okay.
his famous. He and Stuart Gordon did a stage play about Edgar Allan Poe that Gordon
Which
wrote
came
and
real
directed.
close to getting made, and it didn't. And it broke my heart.
Yeah, to
So-
being made into a film, right? Yeah, that would have been good. I've seen clips of the stage play version though, and it still looks good. I'm sorry I never saw the stage version, but
So before we get too far away from that shot, the one of everybody in the face masks, like behind the scenes of the action cast, when we were talking about our first or second movie, someone
Like
floated
ever?
the idea of no, like in season 2,
okay.
someone floated the idea of some kind of pandemic or post-apocalyptic
Yeah, I think that was me.
themed movie, and I think a lot of us shot it down because some of us were like, yeah, I need to like not think about that shit for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I just saw this shot and I was like, fuck, this is what every movie that's made like 2 to 3 years from now is gonna look like.
Yeah,
You're
maybe.
gonna see that shot of crowds with face masks on a whole bunch in cinema as soon as like,
We
people can
might.
go make movies, man.
It depends on
I
how
will-
long. It depends on how long people are actually wearing the face masks and how quickly we want to forget.
It's gonna
about
be
that.
yeah, I think it's
Well-
gonna be a common shot in movies.
I mean,
I'm putting that.
I feel like we're getting into darker talk than. we
Yeah,
actually
well,
should are.
yeah.
Do you think that in 2 or 3 years
It-
it'll be really
sorry.
common to see a dick chainsaw in a movie?
We can only hope. I actually that shot really upset me because it made me remember that I've seen Thanksgiving 3. So
That is truly the greatest nightmare of all.
yeah, so I guess in the interest of summarizing the film,
And we're rambling. Even
we are rambling even by our standards. So the film begins with a robot fight between some American. War is outlawed, but it's also almost moot because there are only 2 countries left in the world: the United States and Russia. And they're called something fancy. It's like the Federation and the Confederacy or something like that. But it's the United States and Russia.
That's the United States and Russia.
And
We know.
yeah,
We know.
and the opening is that the big bad Russian who goes by Alexander, which is a weird name for a Russian. It's supposed like although the American is Achilles, which is a weird name for an American. But they're also they're wrestling gimmick names, right? Like they're not their real names. So, but all the American soldiers are named
Yeah,
after
yeah.
Greek heroes and heroines and gods, and there's only one Russian, so he's Alexander.
It's definitely a wrestling name because he's a heel.
He is a heel. So he destroys whoever the American pilot is. We never, whatever, and crushes him. Which it's like, that's how they make him the bad guy. Is that
It is, he had already surrendered.
Right.
And he
killed him anyways.
yeah.
So that's how we establish that the evil Russian is in fact an evil Russian.
Evil.
He
Yes.
kills his opponents even when they've already yielded.
And I think in the entire rest of the movie, we see the rest of Russia represented with 0 people. No, sorry, 1 person and maybe 3 or 4 seconds on screen. I don't think we see anyone else.
Doesn't he have a couple of friends who come with him into the bar at one point in 1 or 2 shots and none of them say anything?
I didn't think he did.
But maybe he came in alone. I don't know. Yeah, it's like he represents all of Russia basically.
Yes.
No, there were some other dudes with the same uniform as him. I don't think he came.
Were
in.
there?
They were in that bar.
Okay. And then when they have the tribunal, when they're debating, they have the
Four-person
Oh, yeah.
tribunal.
yeah, the 4-person tribunal. Which again, as I said when we were watching it, why would you have an even number of people to make these arbitration decisions? That just seems like a recipe for a deadlock, but
No, there's 2 countries, 2 people per country. There you go.
right. So they
If only you had more than 2 countries.
if only.
Only.
So they there's after that they ready for the next match, and the next match is for Alaska. And so apparently the rules are that when you're a robot jock, you can only fight 10 fights. And once you've fought 10 fights, then like that's it. You retire. If you survive all 10 of your fights, then you are forced to retire. And this is Achilles' 10th fight. And so his manager, who is this Jim Ross looking dude with a black cowboy hat, who apparently was a famous robot jock in his day and survived his 10 fights, is mad that they didn't use Achilles for the last fight, but now they're going to use him for Alaska because they can't let the Russians start taking like mainland America. And so he's not the ex-best whatever at the beginning, but by the time he has to get back in a robot, he's kind of the ex-best whatever who has to be called into action one last time against his better judgment. Or whatever.
Well, he even gets out, right?
Yeah, he
He
does.
does get
He
out.
gets out.
And he's
Yes,
pulled
he gets
back
out,
for
and
one
then he's
last
pulled
job
back for one
again.
last job because he's the best.
Yeah.
And also because he's got a boner for the woman who is going to take his place and wants to... This movie's treatment of the only woman in it is very weird.
Very
It's
strange.
very
I
confusing.
don't think it's cut and dry that that's why he goes back. I think that the movie has both. They give you zero motivation for why he goes back, and also maybe like 10 or 20 different reasons why he could. He's a different character in every scene.
Now, I haven't thought of this as much as you guys, but I feel like there's, in defense of this movie, which is not something I'm going to say often, there's a pretty clear through line of him living this kind of like pampered life, and then like going back to the States and being like, this sucks, and then like actively trying to get back. Like he's clearly motivated by the loss of material goods, which is like not maybe the most what you want to call it, like noble motivation for a hero, but it's also kind of refreshingly direct would be my take
I mean,
on it.
is it? I feel like he says something to her when they're like fighting about he
I can
wanted...
no longer hear Joe.
you can't hear me? Can anybody else hear me?
I
I
can.
didn't mute myself. Okay,
I
cool.
can hear you.
All right, great. I'm going to assume the audience can hear
Open
me
your
too.
ears.
So I feel like he says to her when they fight in his apartment that he did it for her to try to save her. But the treatment of her is super strange. So it's like she's a woman of color. She is attractive, but unconventionally so for 1989. She is
Slightly
portrayed,
androgynous, as you will.
yeah, androgynous, and portrayed as like extremely capable and the best of her like class of weird test tube baby pilots with the eugenics thing that Bryce was talking about earlier. But at the same time, she is sort of infantilized by the hero, and then she is incapable of doing the only thing that she was apparently bred to do, and he has to go save her, which could be a gender politics thing, but also seems like a commentary about the eugenics thing and the biological engineering thing. But I don't love that they picked the only female character in the movie to make that point with, I guess.
She's also up to that point. She's sort of presented like she's going to be an important character, factoring into how the movie winds up. And then there's a certain point where she just disappears.
She doesn't. Yeah.
I feel like we're a little bit, I mean, not that this stuff isn't worth talking about, but we're kind of yada perhaps the dumbest scene in the film, which is the one that leads to his retirement.
Yes.
Is a robot jock's duel between him and the Russian. And after besting the Russian, Achilles knocks the Russian to the ground, and the Russian, because he's dastardly, takes his arm and he shoots his fist weapon into the crowd. Now, I'm going to be generous and just say that the staging didn't work or whatever, because the way it looks is this projectile that's like flying out would take down like a bleacher, would maybe kill like a couple dozen people in the crowd. But then
At most,
Achilles
at
just
most.
like, at most, yeah. Achilles then runs in front of it with his giant robot body and like takes the hit and then falls into the bleacher and kills absolutely everyone in the
Yeah,
bleacher.
they say like
Look,
300 people or something
I
like that,
have to
I
assume
think.
as written or as storyboarded or whatever, because once again, both Joe Haldeman and Stuart Gordon were competent people, that like this missile was supposed to be way more deadly looking than it ended up looking. But like the way it looks is ridiculous.
But
Like
Bryce, it's like a there's a David Lynch thing, like a Mulholland Drive thing going on. It like makes a lot. It demands rewatching. You don't know until you've seen the movie once that fist, even when it's like severed from his body, is enough to single-handedly destroy the entire robot. It's like it's the most powerful weapon that is in this universe.
right.
So it would have
Well, except for magnesium flares, apparently.
It basically looks like the hero kills 300 people for no goddamn reason.
Well,
that would have been interesting, but they treat it like we are, like you said, like how it was probably storyboarded, where like he still killed people, but not as many as otherwise would
Right,
have
like the
died.
fist would have killed
And
more
it's like,
people.
That's definitely not what happened.
And the actor whose name escapes me now because he's not famous, the lead actor in this movie, really does not sell me on the idea that he feels like extremely fucking guilty.
No, he is just real. He just feels really upset that people are calling him out on it. Is what it comes down to in a weird way.
I did my best. What more did you want?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't, and I feel like there should be this weight on him, like, oh man, I tried
there should
to
be some remorse.
I was trying to do the right thing, and then I accidentally killed 300 people or whatever, which again, I'm wondering, they say later in the movie then that like, oh, well, we're not going to let spectators at the robot fights anymore. And I was like, why the fuck were you letting spectators at the live spectators at the robot fights to begin with?
Yeah, the movie's
the reason why I come back to this is not because this other stuff that we were talking about wasn't interesting, or it's not flawed, or it doesn't give you like an interesting look into the time or these creators. But like to me, this was the moment where I fundamentally checked out. Like once that happened, I could take nothing else in this film. Like, okay, seriously is perhaps the wrong word, but like it crushed my suspension of disbelief like it crushed those 300 spectators. Okay, like I just like afterwards I could not give the movie the benefit of the doubt in a way that's pretty essential to a film like Robot Jox.
It's only 85 minutes long, but I feel like even that amount of time. I mean, the movie has how many like central characters are there? There's Alexander. There's what's his name? Aquarius.
Achilles.
There's
Athena. There's Jim Ross.
Yeah.
And then there's the scientist, kinda. The Japanese scientist.
Like, there's enough time. I mean, like, an episode of like a good TV show, there's enough time that, that's like 44 minutes plus commercials or whatever. There's enough time to like have like a little mini emotional arc for maybe like 5 or 6 characters sometimes if it's a good show. And I don't understand why they couldn't do that here. It felt like the movie was 85 minutes long, but it felt like a 20-minute movie. Like it felt like a novella of a movie.
I mean, it moves. That's the one thing I will give this movie credit for. It moves at a brisk clip.
It's funny, like, so on Letterboxd, Bryce D021, if anyone wants to call me on Letterboxd. But no, on Letterboxd, I'm always constantly making jokes where I'm watching older films that are like 82 minutes or like 85 minutes, and they like fit in so much, and I just make the joke like, why are movies allowed to be over 85 minutes long? This is maybe like the one time where there's a film like this, and I'm like, wait, no, where's the rest of it? Like, we could use more. It really, I mean, and it's funny because like of all the films that you do hear about directors being like cut out of the editing room or something like that, I don't think there's a rumor of that with this film. But it does legitimately feel like a 3-hour film that got cut down to 85 minutes. Like, incomprehensible is a strong word, but it's extremely condensed.
So I'm a little more forgiving of that right now because I watched Spookies last week. Which, if you're not familiar with Spookies, is a movie where, like, a British guy commissioned an American film crew to make a movie to his specifications. Basically, he wanted like a PG-13 Evil Dead ripoff. And they made that movie, and then in the edit, he was like, nah, fuck you guys. You guys suck. I'm hiring another director to reshoot half of the movie without any of the original cast or the script and just like insert it into this movie you made. So this movie does not feel like Spookies, and so it gets a pass from me because at least it's 85 minutes of like clearly one coherent story and not two separate movies like smashed together in, you know, in a car crusher, and just like we're left
Robot
with
Jocks.
this.
It's better than Spookies.
Yes.
Put it on the 4K.
Yeah, but hey man, I watched Spookies because I bought it on Blu-ray, so that's the kind of person I am, if you've been curious.
We all knew.
Yeah, I know you did. So I don't know. I think that, yeah, I mean, it does definitely feel like, you know, 150 pounds of shit in a 100-pound bag in some ways. But like I said, it moves so fast that, and it's like, I feel like if they'd added another half hour to it, I would have ended up being like, this is fucking agonizing. Get to the point already.
I agree with that. I don't agree that it's a lot of, it's like 150 pounds of shit in a 10-pound bag, but like it didn't make it in the bag, like actually 140 pounds of the shit fell out, and the 10 pounds that it ended up staying in there is just kind of a random assortment of the shit that you meant to put in there.
Right. Yeah.
That's an excellent description of this film, actually.
Yeah.
It's dead on.
Yeah. I mean, there were things I do. So I do like the robot fights. I think you can actually see where all the money went in the robot fights. And the the penis chainsaw, and the weird, I actually really liked, it's not a very long sequence, but the weird, like, American Gladiators jungle gym where, like, the test tube baby pilots have to prove who's the best to be the next pilot.
Yeah. That was amusing, yes.
I liked that.
That scene was bad. I didn't like that.
I just like the idea
I
of,
was
like,
so
them just...
confused.
Well, no, but I like that scene because, like, once again, that was, like, a very Forever War scene to me of, like, you know, basically these freaks of nature, these things that should not be, are thrown into this system by bureaucrats who then just, like, toss sadism at them for, like, no apparent reason. And then this is the system that works. This was the best we
and
could
not
come up
only
with.
that,
Like,
but also, like, this is the only test.
Well,
Yeah, but then
the
it's, like,
implication is
not
that they've been
that's-
training before
but
that.
they're-
This is
but
like
they
the
didn't-
final
Yeah,
test.
they've been training, but then they're like, all right, this is how we're going to separate the wheat from the
Look,
chaff.
man, they need a pilot by
that's-
Saturday.
Death Jungle Gym.
They need a pilot by Saturday, man.
That was a scene that seemed like satire, that worked as satire, and like a lot of this movie, my problem with it, and why, once again, like you want, like let's set aside Reanimator. Like, he made more than one good movie, but like so many of his good films, like Edmund and basically the movie that Falling Down wanted to be, and then, like, you know, From Beyond. They're such
From Beyond,
like masters of tone. Like, From Beyond is a film, like, once again, it's like 85 minutes, and it's over the top from frame one, and it just keeps escalating and escalating. And once you're sure it can't get any more fucking insane, it does. Like, it's just constantly breaking through ceilings. So I just find it so funny that this movie's control of tone isn't any good at all. Like, the films that, I mean, the scenes that feel like they're supposed to be satire come off as clunky, and the films that feel like they're supposed to be straight-laced heroism, like the guy accidentally murdering 300 people, like, come off as satire. And, like, it's just this very mismatched and strange film that never really gets its bead.
Yeah.
Done,
I agree. I agree with that. But I think, I don't know, Anthony obviously didn't like it. I think the weird electrified fucking murder jungle gym worked. Like you said, Bryce, it worked for me as...
But it's the exception, not the rule.
Yes, I agree.
The electrified part of it wasn't the coolest part of it. It was that at one point she grabs on one of the bars and it just squirts oil out of it.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Like Willy Wonka designed the...
Right. The Willy Wonka's Murder Jungle Gym. That would be the episode title if we still did that.
Penis chainsaw.
Yeah, right.
I'd vote for Willy Wonka's Murder Jungle Gym.
Yeah, I do too. But
So it's I don't know.
again, like even if you're right that they only had a week to choose them, this is the one test out of all their whole gauntlet that they chose is like this. All right.
I think
this
my
is the one
favorite
we
thing
gotta-
about it is that these skills do not transfer to robot fights in any meaningful
right,
way
at all.
I'm actually a little bit surprised at how much Anthony dislikes this film because, I mean, like we have all talked
Oh,
about.
I didn't say that.
Okay, because I was gonna say we've all talked about all the things in this film that don't work, and Lord knows there are a lot. But like, it's also kind of got that goofy big-heartedness and sincerity that's usually Anthony's thing. So, I mean, like, let's hear it, Anthony. Like, where do you stand on the robot jobs?
It's okay. I think
Oh.
it's funny because a lot of things don't work. It is also a very much a data point in the Eric Stephen Allen theory of any movie that is 90 minutes or less can only be so bad.
That's
Yeah.
Like
It's certainly
this-
it's not a boring movie. I think the
like
worst.
Joe said,
No,
if this
no,
was
it's
an
not.
hour,
It's not boring.
if this was a half hour longer, I would have hated this movie.
Yeah.
And instead,
That's-
it was like
I
this.
wanted to
Everything
say-
is moving on just enough of a clip that I never like pulled my phone out and got bored.
I want to clarify my position, which is that I don't necessarily think an extra half hour or an hour would make the movie better. It would just
No.
make it make more sense.
It would have to
And,
be
you know.
an extra half an hour, and also you replace everyone who made the movie.
Well, everyone who started
Yes,
the movie
okay.
at least. So
a lot of the actors are not great.
I
we've
like
been
the
talking about
villain,
this for an
actually.
hour, and we haven't even talked about the espionage plot.
I was actually just gonna say. So the other
Oh,
B
wait,
plot is
I was gonna say say exactly that. That when we were talking about, I don't know how to feel about the treatment of the female character in this movie because it kind of cuts both ways. I was so relieved when the like racist, womanizing Texan ended up being a bad guy
yeah,
because I could not tell for half that movie.
yeah.
Like it seemed like the main character. I didn't even know the guy was the main character at first because they were like making degrading comments about her and high-fiving and stuff, and I was like, am I supposed to? Is that guy supposed to be the main character? Am I supposed to like him? Like what's going on here? And then yeah, so at least that happened.
Yeah, so there's this B plot which doesn't actually really pay off in any meaningful way, but there's this B plot of there's a leak inside the American squad, and they're giving
Green laser.
they're giving the evil Russians the word on all the new weapons that are developed so they can counter the new weapons. The green laser was supposed to be the weapon that finished off the Russian in the fight for Alaska, but he managed to avoid it. How did he manage to do that? There's a leak. Someone's leaking. And there's this whole setup of one who is the mole. Even though I thought it was like fairly obvious it was the cowboy for most of the movie. But two, that once the main weapons designer, Japanese guy, once he figures out that there's a mole and that he is going to keep the weapons briefing a secret until the pilot is in the unit and like is doing the thing, you're sort of made to believe like, well, whatever this weapon is, it's going to be super fucking dope and it's going to be the thing that ends up like winning the day. And it's fucking magnesium flares, and she uses them immediately, and they do basically like she uses them. The Russian gets blinded, and then she doesn't follow up with any attack. She just stands there until he can see again, and then he fucks her up. Like, okay.
I texted my brother while I was watching this movie. I just watched it right before we recorded, and I told my brother's a huge fan of giant robot media. My brother actually made a tabletop game about giant robots. It's called Giga Robo. You should buy it. I told him that I was watching Robot Jocks and asked if he'd seen it, and he said that he hadn't seen it recently, but his best friend from when he was like 12 years old made him rent it from the video store because in this other kid's memory, it had a whole lot of nudity in it.
That'd be the most disappointing watch of all time.
Yeah, right.
So they watched it, and I don't think he'd seen it since then. And I said, like, yeah, this movie makes no sense. And he said, yeah, they sure care a whole lot about the colors of lasers. So it made a deep impression on him.
Yeah,
They do.
apparently.
So I will say that in my brain, I had conflated this film with Robot Wars, which is advertised on the box as from the creators of the makers of Robot Jocks. And I remember
Is it
that
actually?
it's a Full Moon. It's another or Empire Productions. But I remember that one stood out because one of the robots looks like a scorpion. And so that was, but I don't remember anything now. Like I kind of want to go back and watch that movie because I have the vague. It's one of those movies that you see as a kid on cable, and some of them really, really stick with you, and some of them, don't. And that's one that stuck with me enough to remember that I watched it at least like 2 or 3 times, but I can't remember any of the plot specifics other than there's a robot that looks like a scorpion. And like in that same class of movie is like, there's one with Billy Blanks where he plays like a Terminator type figure, and now I can't even remember what it's called, like Tech 3000 or something weird like that. And then there was one about a time traveling robot that was like a really bad Terminator ripoff, but the robot was like just a dude in like a silver suit. It was like really bad, and I can't remember what that one's called either. But it's one of those movies that's so weird and off budget and small that you kind of are like, was that a fever dream or did I actually see that movie? And I think I need to rewatch Robot Wars now to figure out which is the case. Anyways, that was a digression. Sorry.
If we're going to finish this, I mean, finish might be premature, but I will say that if we're kind of hearing the plot, that the one thing that I really do like in this movie, and one thing that feels like both a Gordon and a Haldeman touch, is the
Cowboy Suicide.
Cowboy Suicide. No, I was gonna say so basically in the final duel, and I'm firmly aware that we're skipping over the penis chainsaw. We can go back to it.
And the Cowboy Suicide.
Eventually, they get out of their robots and just start beating the shit out of each other. And I love this very low-tech ending, both because it obviously saved Full Moon like a whole bunch of money to shoot it that way, but then it's a surface irony. You can call it cheap if you want, but I love the idea of like this whole film we've been watching these like billion-dollar war machines fighting, and it just comes down to 2 dudes pummeling each other, and then those 2 dudes just decide it's not worth it. Like the dramatic art there in the final 4 minutes of the film, if in nowhere else, is bespoke.
Yes,
so,
unfortunately, it
credit where it's due.
even though it saved them a lot of money to finish the movie out that way, it did not save them enough money to afford to score that scene, or even to lay in like some atmospheric like presence. Like it was just like studio lot, just dead air.
So that's
bizarre.
That's actually one thing. I mentioned this when we were doing our little group watch, which was Bryce and Anthony and I watched it together. And the movie, part of what makes the movie, I think,
where were you,
look
Ethan?
cheap. You should have been there, Ethan. Part of what makes the movie look cheap, I think, is kind of what you were just alluding to, which is another aspect of that is that the whole movie is lit like a goddamn sitcom. It's I Love Lucy lighting. Like everything's super overlit, and that makes it look cheaper than I think it would if there was a little more use of shadow and colored lighting and depth, but everything is just like bright white fucking fluorescent lighting oversaturating everything, and it shows all the seams and the cheap sets and the cheap props and the cheap,
And it's baffling because really none of Gordon's other films look like that.
No, they don't. They don't. Especially not, like From Beyond and Reanimator, like they don't look anything like that. So I don't know if he had a different lighting guy on this one or what happened, but it's not just me, right? Like I'm not crazy.
No.
This movie is super overlit, right?
It's a bad looking film, and that's the thing is like, look,
Except
I love
in the opening credits. The opening credits are beautiful.
I love stop motion. Like I hate to say this, like I love stop motion as an artifact, so I love the stop motion in this film as an artifact. I don't think the stop motion's that great in this film. Like it's never.
I think it looks fine.
Convincing's the wrong word, but like it's never particularly interesting. Like it's just.
I wanted more from the robot fights for sure. I wanted more interesting choreography. I wanted Pacific Rim, which is unreasonable, but that's. Right. I wanted a stop motion version of that, though. Basically.
Is
I
Pacific
wanted
Rim?
chainsaws coming out of everywhere.
Is it? Would it be fair to say that Pacific Rim is to this as Mad Max Fury Road is to Hell Comes to Frogtown?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a fair comparison.
Okay.
I,
I've never seen Pacific Rim, but maybe I.
well,
haven't either.
let me walk that back there a little. I think I like Pacific Rim maybe even more than Guillermo del Toro does, and like a lot of people like Pacific Rim. I really love Pacific Rim, and we will get on this tangent some other time. Okay, but I think the details in it are amazing. But I'll just say that for that. That being said, as the number one Pacific Rim fan in the world, doesn't touch Fury Road. Like that. I mean, I understand that's the A to B analogy, but even the analogy breaks down on that.
Well, sure, but I mean, if the argument is that Pacific Rim is the best a giant fighting robot movie can be, and Fury Road is maybe the best a post-apocalyptic sci-fi thriller can be. Although I like Road Warrior a lot.
Allow me to put it this way. Pacific Rim is maybe the best giant robot fighting film that has been. I do not necessarily believe that's the best giant fighting robot film that could be.
Oh, well, that's fair.
That would be my distinction, and you can say it's without difference if you like, but I'm standing by it.
I'm just waiting for the big screen adaptation of Voltron to come through. That's all. That's gonna. So.
Do you want to illustrate the cowboy suicide for us?
Yeah, let's talk about the cowboy suicide. The cowboy suicide might be my new favorite on-screen suicide, which is a weird thing to say. I understand, but like, so
the three of us understand, if no one else.
Yeah. So here's the deal: they find out so the cowboy frames the Japanese weapons designer as the mole, which doesn't really even make any sense that anyone would ever believe that, because why wouldn't he just defect to the Russians and build weapons for them instead? But it turns out, so there's this little, actually, the one thing that I was glad that the plot thread that started at the beginning and got tugged on enough that it actually made sense later was Athena asks early on how the cowboy, in his final match against whatever Russian, how he managed to fire his laser at the exact right spot of the shield and breach the shield and win the match and survive his 10th fight and then go on to retirement. And he says, look, I was lucky. And she's like, that's impossible. And then it comes around as the weapons designer, Doctor, explains, like, yeah, dude, you weren't lucky. Someone told you where the weak spot in the shield was, and you've been paying them back by leaking our weapons designs to them ever since. And so he kills the doctor and then frames it as a suicide, except what he doesn't know is that the doctor recorded the both of them talking right before he was shot and killed. And that plays then in the bay with the weapons. It's like appended to the end of the weapons briefing, basically. And so when the cowboy knows he's caught, they're like, okay, you're going to fry for this, cowboy, and he is like, basically like, you'll never take me alive. And he runs towards, he knocks down 2 guards, even though he's like 50 years old and overweight. He like knocks down these 2 guards and he goes hauling ass towards the hangar of the robot, which is like the way that that Athena commandeered the robot and escaped. She did some damage to the hangar. So there's a hole in the wall between like the office and the control center where they like talk to the pilot and the hangar. And so he just dives through this hole yelling Geronimo and splatters himself on the bottom of the hangar. It's the gleeful way in which he jumps through that hole and screams Geronimo. Just like ask Bryce and Anthony. I was laughing my ass off. I was dying when that happened. It was so good. It's so good.
Really
and then everyone in the room, nobody in the room is even a shred of traumatized. Everyone just is immediately
like,
back into action.
They just like turn around.
The main character like makes some kind of cheeky comment on the little headset.
Headset, yeah.
It is. Wait. It is exactly.
His lifelong mentor betrayed him and then killed himself, and he's like,
It is exactly that scene in Airplane where the guy's been sniffing glue and he yells, "It's coming right at us," and he dives out the window, and everyone else watches him dive out the window and then turns around and talks as if nothing happens. It is exactly that scene, only
Mhm.
this isn't a comedy, so it's weirder and
Yeah.
possibly better.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. Basically. Mm-hmm.
I appreciated that this movie, they didn't give him a future gun. I think that a lot of action movies tend to, like, if it's even like set 4 years in the future, they have this like big fucking zapper looking future gun. Like they did that in
Like Time Cop? Yeah.
yeah. That movie skips. What is it? It take place in like 2004 or something like that. And like, yeah, I liked that it was just a handgun in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's probably because they ran out of money. But.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go with Ethan's probably on that one.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I would say ultimately that I would recommend this movie to people who haven't seen it just because it's weird enough and different enough that I think it's worth spending 85 minutes with. I don't know. What do you guys think?
My feelings are kind of the same on what I told Anthony on Inland Empire, which is, if you have other David Lynch or Stuart Gordon films to watch, then you should probably go watch those. But if this is your last one and you're a Stuart Gordon fan and you just want to see all the weird permutations that this guy's career took, it's probably worth watching. I don't know if I would, as a casual action fan, recommend this film. If it was just like my buddy or even a nerdy movie friend looking for a good time at the movies, I feel like you can do better.
Yeah, I mean, I get like if you're that guy who hasn't seen like The Running Man or Total Recall or something yet, like this is not the sci-fi action movie you should see. But if you've seen all the big ones, and like you said, if you've seen most of Stuart Gordon's other films, and if or if you just really like giant fighting robots, maybe, because there aren't a lot of those.
I'm not mad I saw it. It was fun. I like the various parts of Stuart Gordon, the various parts of Joe Haldeman you saw in it were interesting. It had its couple moments. Do I think that I now, as a 35-year-old man with 40 short years ahead of me, if I don't die of the Rona, like,
I hope you don't.
Will I ever use any of those fleeting moments to revisit this film again? Probably not. And like, unless you're super into robots, Stuart Gordon, or 70s, 80s sci-fi, you maybe also don't want to use your fleeting time here on this earth to watch Robot Jox. You can do without it.
That's fair. What do you think, Ethan?
I think, I feel two ways about it, because I agree with what Bryce said, that it really could have used an extra half an hour or even an hour, but also I think it was about 5 minutes of runtime away from like just making me really mad. So I think that it's not good. It's bad, but it respected my time. And there are good movies that, like for instance, like a movie like Casino or something. It's fine, whatever. It didn't respect my time.
I thought you hated Casino. I remember at one point having it out on this very podcast about Casino.
I'm too fucking tired to do this right now. Please don't do this to me.
Casino's better than Goodfellas. I said it.
Anyway.
It's
let's not.
I'm not comparing confidence to a Robot Jox. I'm just
You've
saying.
grown as a person, Bryce.
Well, no. Here's okay. Well, fucking Casino. Well, no. I could see the argument that Casino is better than Goodfellas, except that Sharon Stone to me is a drag on the ticket, and the reason's very simple, because even in a wildly inferior film, and I say wildly inferior film like Blow, when it comes time for the character to like throw his life away, like you believe it because you would throw your life away for Penelope Cruz in that film. And I never feel like Sharon's like she's charming in her early scenes, but I never feel like she has that like intense sexual magnetism or charisma or whatever you want to call it to make like Ace just completely self-destruct his life. Like in like the second scene where she's fucking around, she would be dead. And like it's just a thing. Like she's not strong enough of an actress. And like it's funny, like an actress who I actually think is very similar to Stone is Margot Robbie, except the difference is that Margot Robbie is like, 20% more talented, and yeah, if we're gonna be slightly piggish here, like 20% hotter than Sharon Stone. So like she can sell it, and to me, Sharon Stone cannot do it in that film, and it's the Achilles heel of the entire film.
So
The Achilles heel.
Whoa, Achilles heel. That was another thing I didn't
Yeah.
like, that there was no heel for Achilles.
I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to discuss Casino.
It was
God
all-
damn it, Ethan.
right.
all to set up that joke.
Yeah, no. So yeah, you did. The only thing I'm gonna say is I think that Ray Liotta is a drag on Goodfellas, because actually he's not that good of an actor. I don't think, and he's also not. I'm.
Great in that.
He is the best he ever was in Goodfellas, but
And he's amazing in Goodfellas. Amazing.
You didn't believe that Sharon Stone's character in Casino was enough of a powerful presence to lead the main character of the movie to throw his life away. But what about?
No, I mean, are you kidding?
Do you think that she had the right level of magnetism
she wasn't
out of his retirement?
She wasn't that bad, and she, out of all the actors in Robot Jox, apparently had the longest sustained career. So
I mean,
good
she's
for
probably
her.
turns in the best performance. I think.
I mean, seriously though, when Sharon Stone
It's a weird
kidnaps his
performance,
kid,
but-
Sharon Stone kidnaps his child, and he's not going to have.
I'm blaming you for this, Anthony. I'm blaming you for this, Anthony.
I specifically asked him.
Anybody do best.
Anyway,
Specifically asked.
so actually, what I do want to ask you, Bryce, though, is you are, I think, the only one who
Yes.
ended up watching Fortress. So that is Stuart Gordon's
Yeah.
other action film. Would you revisit Fortress before you revisited Robot Jox?
I would revisit Fortress before I revisited Robot Jox. I would not do it very quickly. To me, it's the same thing where it's funny because you talk about the lighting, and it actually like put a little ding above my head, which was like, oh yeah, that's why not. The difference is in Fortress is that it's more motivated. The idea in Fortress is everything's a shit show. Hey, once again, we can't relate to that at all. And Christopher Lambert is trying to smuggle his wife across the Canadian border, and they get caught. They get sent to the Fortress, which is a big underground prison where anyone that the government doesn't like is sent. And Christopher Lambert has to try and escape from the prison. Now, despite what you might have thought by me saying Christopher Lambert 3 times in there, I think the problem with Fortress is that it has like an amazing cast,
Including Lambert.
Yeah, no, I think I'm on record of liking Lambert more than anyone else on the action cast. So I have a big soft spot for him. But anyway, there's Lambert, there's Tom Towles, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, Clifton Collins.
Action movie favorite, Clifton Gonzalez.
Clifton Collins is one of my favorite character actors of the modern era, and he has a baby in this, and he's great. And
was that even before the Stoned Age? Because that's the first thing I ever remember seeing him in.
I think it might be. I think it's like 92, 93.
Wow. So is he actually? Does he play like their kid? Is that?
No. He's like 18. He's
okay.
He's like the fish who gets thrown in with them.
Gotcha.
Like the real young kid. And then there's Combs, of course. A much bigger role than he has here. And I'm forgetting his
Barbara
name.
Crampton make an appearance in?
Honestly, it's slipping my mind at the moment. Okay. I don't believe so. But the dad from 70s Show and the bad guy from RoboCop, Clarence Bodecker,
Kurtwood Smith.
Yes, he plays the warden of the futuristic prison, and it's really casting against type, because this time he's asking the bitches to stay. So, But it's one of those films where, like, once again, it was not inexpensive. It cost 12 million in Clinton era dollars, so call that 30-40 here. So a decent budget.
Those movies
And
literally don't exist anymore, which makes me
Yeah.
sad in a way that I find hard to put into
and
words.
you've got a great cast, and like, so for me, I just kept watching it, going like, why isn't this better? Like, what is keeping this from cohering for me? And I never quite got the answer.
So
to
how
that.
far
Like,
flung is the future in Fortress? Is it like
Well, I think
2001, or is it
I
like...
think, yeah, I don't quote me on that, but I think it's 2001. So it's not like it. I mean, there's a fair amount of sci-fi ideas in it, and probably its most. Let me put it this way: like, it has its moments. That would be my review of Fortress. Like, it has parts that work, and then it all, like, there's some moments of surprise body horror when they, like, come across the prison guards of the fortress in their natural state that are, like, surprisingly effective, and like some of the conflict that they're trying to go for with Clarence Bodecker's character, who I'll just call him, is great, but is interesting, and it's going for it.
So I think,
And,
actually,
and-
now you mentioning that has made me realize one thing that I think might be the Achilles heel, because there isn't one in the movie, even though the guy's name is Achilles, in Robot Jocks, is that it's is PG or PG-13. And so
Yeah.
I feel like if there were the potential for a little more body horror, if there were the potential for when they get out of the robot, the Russian gets really badly fucked up, or like he actually squishes the dude at the beginning and you see it. Some of that kind of stuff would make it feel a little more Gordon, at least, than...
I gotta say that, yeah, but it doesn't make it that much better. I mean, Fortress is... Look, let me put it this way. Like, Fortress is basically a C-plus movie to me. It has the elements, it has moments, it has these interesting character actors. Every time I see Tom Towles, I have to think of my favorite line from The Devil's Rejects, which is "Mother Pin a Rose on Me." So it's got all these elements, but it just never quite comes together. Robot Jocks is more of a D+. So it's
Okay.
C minus.
So we're gonna full letter grade of sweep
full letter
between
grade on this one.
Robot Jocks and
Yeah.
Fortress. Okay, maybe we
Yeah,
should have
but
just
if
watched
you-
Fortress then.
D+
But
where you didn't think that the kid was even show up for the final.
Right, exactly. So yes, it's a full letter grade because Fortress works more as a competent film. Did I have a lot of? I know this is an extremely subjective thing, but like, it just kept going. Like, I am not having as much fun watching this film as I should be under these circumstances, and
Yeah. Well, I think that
like,
think
occasionally film watching is extremely subjective. And
that's. I mean, it
there's not much more I can
always
say about
is. I think it always is,
Yeah.
is subjective, but I think that's part of what made Robot. I think I would have liked Robot Jocks less if I hadn't been watching it with you two guys.
Yeah,
That definitely affected my, like, because there's been movies I've seen, especially like there are movies I've seen in a theater that I think if I saw them, like if I saw Devil Fetus again, not with a bunch of rowdy Nash villains at a 12-hour horror movie marathon, I probably would not enjoy it nearly as much as I enjoyed seeing Devil Fetus in that setting. And I think part of what made Robot Jocks fun, and why so people who listened to me earlier when I said I would maybe watch it with your friends, because I think watching it alone probably is not that fun.
Yeah, I watched it alone, and it was a bizarre experience.
Yeah. So
I could
actually,
almost see like entertainment from an alternate universe at that point, just like
felt like
staring at
waking
your
up
TV,
from-
going, "What is this?"
It felt like how you feel when you wake up from a nap.
that's I almost kind of like that. Like when you're in a hypnagogic state, that's called when you're about to fall asleep or when you're waking up. You're in that hypnagogic state. I like that. And I like movies that nail that. So if you thought this movie nailed it, that would actually, I would like it more if I felt like this movie nailed that. But so since I mentioned Robot Wars and all that stuff, this movie has me thinking this is absolutely you see this on cable in the 90s movie. And I really miss, we've probably talked about this before, but I really miss the discoverability of the basic cable movie. And I feel like that doesn't really exist anymore. Like, all the movies that I always see advertised whenever I watch a normal show on basic cable are super big budget. Like, all the, like, TNT pays to show, like, fucking Wonder Woman and the Avengers and Star Wars and, like, the low budget, like the first time we did a cast infamously a long time ago about the Guyver 2, and I saw the Guyver 1 on late night cable one time, and I came into it right at the part where, like, the giant rubber monster fights are basically in full swing in the first Guyver movie. So I got none of the exposition and just a bunch of rubber monsters beating the shit out of each other. And I was like 11 years old, and I was like, this is the greatest fucking thing I have ever seen in my life. What is this movie? Why did Luke Skywalker just turn into a weird centipede beetle monster? What the fuck is going on? That dude just carved his way out of that other dude. This fucking rules. And I feel like 11-year-olds now don't get that same experience. Disgust.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, during the Wild West days of cable, they were just buying anything to fill programming. What was like the fun part about it. And I mean, like, one thing that you and I used to be like a semi punchline on the original show was randomly referencing Erg Music War.
Yes.
Because Erg Music War would just show up on TBS every now and then. Why? Because you had to fill programming, you know?
And why not fill it with concert footage of USA. Klaus Nomi, of all fucking people?
Right.
And Gary Newman.
The fucking Go-Go's are punk rock in that movie, dude.
Yeah.
You know, so...
I had that soundtrack. I have that soundtrack on double LP. Yeah. That movie rules.
Warner's Archive has a nice edition of it. So.
Oh. Fuck, I wish I'd known that when I made my order in their 4 for $44 sale.
Fucking Sting is punk in that movie.
Yeah, the Police...
Everyone is punk in that movie.
The Police fucking... I don't know what happened to Sting when the Police broke up. He suddenly got way less interesting, but I love... The Police are one of my favorite bands. I love the Police.
The Onion's early article...
Yes. I was in the grocery store.
It is maybe one of my favorite pieces of music criticism of all time, and it's fucking savage, and it's fucking...
Yes. I heard the song. It sounded really interesting, and I realized it was me.
It almost makes you driven to tears.
There you go. Tears. Nailed it. So I did actually remember. Do we think we're done? Are we wrapping up on Robot Jocks and Stuart Gordon?
We're ending on the high point that is Erg Music
Okay.
War.
So I did remember.
It's still gone on longer than Robot Jocks.
Yeah, it has.
Just
about. I remembered a piece of action movie news that I forgot to mention at the top of the show. And it's one of those things that you always take with a grain of salt because stars say things and movies that are in development often end up in development hell and they never end up happening.
I've thought about this also.
But Stallone just casually dropped in like an Instagram live Q&A or something, or a Facebook live Q&A, that they're working on Demolition Man 2.
I will confidently say that will not happen. I will confidently say that will not happen. And, yeah.
All right.
I don't know if I want it to either.
Yeah, no, I actively do not want it to happen, but it's funny that it allegedly is happening. But
you know what? In a very funny way, Rambo: Last Blood kind of made me lose all faith in Stallone, just because, like, I know it's kind of inherently political to have Rambo versus the cartels, but like, just on a pulp level, that's like a perfect story. That's all you need. That is a peanut butter and jelly story. Is like Rambo versus a bunch of fucking criminals with like money and weapons. Like that's a great story right there. And somehow they fucked it up. Like they fucked it all the way up. And I just sat there as the end credits were rolling, and I'm like, this is someone who just no longer has any idea what they're doing. So I don't want to see what that man would do with Demolition 2. I went on a random rant about Creed 2 last episode. I still like him as an actor. I just don't ever want to see any of his creative ideas again. Like, you know?
So I still haven't watched Last Blood.
No, You don't need it.
That's kind of what I've heard, but now it's on Amazon Prime, and like I'm stuck indoors, and I'm kind of like, maybe I should just watch it. I remember seeing Rambo 4. I probably told the story when we did our Rambo episode a million years ago.
Breathtaking movie.
Right, I saw that movie at the Dollar Theater thinking it would be hilariously stupid and awful because Rambo 3 kind of fucking sucks, and he hadn't done Rambo in, whatever, 20, however many years it was at that point. 20 years,
Yeah.
give or take, at that point. And I was like, this is going to be awful, and I went and I was like, this is the second best Rambo movie. What the fuck is going on?
To clarify, yeah, I go to the mat for Rambo 4. I think it is a wonderful murder cartoon. I definitely think it is the best of the series aside from First Blood. As wonderful of a murder cartoon Rambo 4 is, Rambo Last Blood is as bad of a murder cartoon. Like this movie does nothing right, and it is also almost absurdly dark and not in a good way. It's just it. Let's put it this way. Rambo 4, like, I love it. I am under no illusion that it's flawless or doesn't have like problematic elements or like sticks its tone all the time. But like as a film, I love wholeheartedly. Like it makes you like as a film that is just somewhat fucking odd from front to back. It makes you realize what a masterful control of tone Rambo 4 Rambo had because Rambo Last Blood is just what are you doing film. Like every choice it makes is the wrong choice, almost like beat for beat. And
Rambo 4 does the thing that a lot of those like 80s Reaganite action movies do, where it's like the people who made the movie have an absolutely insane broken worldview, but the movie just takes place in a world where that worldview is correct and everything plays out how those people would think it's going to play out. And I cringe my way through those movies, but they make me happy. So that's you're saying that Rambo Last Blood does not do that.
No, Rambo Last Blood will not make you happy, and it's weird that it like it's almost like he had the mission of let me not make you happy. Like it's like Stallone was told the story of No Country for Old Men, but they skipped the Shigur character, and this somehow inspired him to make Rambo. Let me put it this way: like originally when it was announced, like a year after Rambo, they're like,
it was a really long time ago. Like we talked about it on the original Action Cast, which we had not recorded for 5 years or so when we started doing this incarnation 2 months ago.
And they were just like, it's going to be Rambo versus the cartels. And I'm like, oh, you know what? That sounds like a cool story. Like that, because like at the end of Rambo, he goes back to America. So, it just kind of becomes like this siege film. Like that could be like a cool film. And then they announced that it was going to be Rambo in the Alaskan wilderness fighting a genetically modified monster. And I'm like, that sounds like a terrible version of Rambo to do. And then they canceled that and they went back to the cartels and they didn't make it for like another 5 years. I wish they had made the genetically engineered monster in Alaska film. That would have been a better film than what we got.
I heard that the last 15 minutes of Last Blood is like Murder Home Alone, and that's like the only good part of the movie. Would you even agree with that, or you think like that even that wasn't?
I would say it's not so much Murder Home Alone as it is shitty Skyfall. Put it that way.
Okay.
The
ending of Skyfall is great. Skyfall is one of my favorite Bond movies.
Yeah, Skyfall is my second favorite Bond film, and it's definitely the ending of it is Murder Home Alone. I can see where it's going for, and it's kind of where I wanted the movie to be up to that point, but by that point, it's too little too late. Like, it's been so tone deaf and so odd throughout the whole film.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. It's an unfortunate film.
That's unfortunate.
Watch it. Draw your own conclusions. I'll be interested to see.
You just told me not to watch it, so I'm not sure.
I'm telling the audience in TV land not to watch it. I'm telling you, Joe Drilling, to draw your own.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, well, maybe I'll report back on the next Action Cast.
Yeah.
You first, Anthony.
I can't be the only person ranting like a lunatic on the podcast. That's all I'm saying.
That you never are. There's always
High
more,
five.
more of those. Oh man. So I think are we done? Are we? I think we're finished
done.
here.
Did
Any-
everyone
everybody.
wait. Before, well, okay, we could probably have saved this, but did
Good
everyone
morning, everybody.
hate my idea of Black Cat as a future action cast?
Black
I didn't
Cat.
see. I have not seen Black Hat, so I could not comment on that.
That's
But I think
bad
we
if they
should.
cross your path, right?
We should. Yes, it's bad if they cross your path.
Yes.
I will say, actually, I mean, we don't do the I Watched the Thing segment anymore, but again, we're all under quarantine. If anybody hasn't checked out Extraction, which also features Chris Hemsworth, it's on Netflix. It was a direct-to-Netflix thing that I don't know how much Netflix paid for it, because that's a big movie that probably could have made a lot of money in theaters.
I think
No,
you mean
I'd
extra
actually-
action.
I'd like to hear you extrapolate on this a little bit more, because really, literally every review I've said is like outside of the one take shot, it's not worth watching. Would you disagree with this?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. If you took Man on Fire and John Wick and you made them both like a little bit worse, but then like smashed them together, that's this movie. The action sequences are pretty good. The story is not all that interesting because it's literally like we were like 3 minutes into it and my wife was like, "So it's Man on Fire," and I was like, "Yep." And then you see the first action sequence and you're like, it's Man on Fire by way of John Wick, but not as good as either of those things. But if you like action movies and you like big budget action movies that can afford to do,
But if you
these
don't like Man on Fire, 'cause
sort,
it's boring.
you'll like this. You might like this more than Man on Fire because this movie is definitely not boring. This movie has a lot of action beats. It has a lot of, hand-to-hand fighting and shooting and explosions and a pretty good car chase. And I thought it was really fun. I mean, there's the low likelihood that I ever watch it again, but there are so many movies out there that, I don't, at this point in my life, I'm not like, I haven't gone full Pauline Kael where I never rewatch a movie or anything, but, I don't rewatch a lot of them, but I enjoyed it. I think if you have a Netflix subscription and you're looking for something to watch where Chris Hemsworth just like fucking neck snaps a bunch of dudes and fucking like, I mean, it's shittier John Wick with Chris Hemsworth instead of Keanu Reeves. That if that's what you want out of a movie, you'll have fun with it, I think.
So
I think I have probably an even more high profile and sort of like Hollywood mainstream I watched a thing. But it's not from quarantine exactly. It was from I had a series of flights for work between basically like I think it was like
Yeah,
November
what'd you drink?
and Anthony. I think it's like November, December, January. I was in a plane. I like flew 8 times or something. So which is not being quarantined, but being in a plane for that much of your month feels kind of like being
Sucks.
quarantined. Yes.
Yeah.
So I decided that I would watch the first 3 Bourne movies, and I had never seen any Bourne content before somehow. So I watched the first 3, and I thought the first one was absolutely fucking awesome. I loved it.
And then they get progressively shittier after that.
The second one I thought was pretty solid, and I thought the third was like an unwatchable. It was like infuriatingly bad, which I think I turned on it, like watching them in succession like that. I turned on the third one harder than critics did at the time, I think. Because
at the time, The Ultimatum had a pretty good reputation.
yeah, I thought it was.
I have fondish memories of it. I mean, I was very sad when Patty Constantine's taken out in the first act of any film, but I also haven't seen it long enough time that I am not going to go to the mat defending it.
I feel
It has
like
opportunity.
those movies got the reputation of having destroyed action cinematography and action editing. And I don't think that reputation is necessarily completely unearned, but I think they get a little bit too much shit, especially since the first movie I remember seeing where I was like, that was supposed to be an action movie and I could not understand one fucking thing that happened in it, was End of Days, which came out like 5 years before the first Bourne movie.
I think those felt the degradation that went on with action cinematography that thankfully seems to have reached its high water mark and is now rolling back. I think the ugly secret is it does have as much to do with the advent of CGI as anything else. Just because
Yeah.
people didn't want people getting a close look at stuff. That being said, of course, you can make a counter argument. You know, the Wachowskis obviously used it to slow everything way the fuck down and let you get a good look at everything. But on the whole, I think a lot of shitty workman like CG and stunt work and digital stunt work was covered with shaky cam, and that would have happened with or without Greengrass and crew.
That's probably true. I think it's weird. Like I watched I watched a little direct to VHS gem called No Retreat, No Surrender 3 Blood Brothers a couple months ago. And it's just bizarre to see this like zero budget movie starring Lauren Avedon, who I'm so sad that part of the reason I wanted to bring this show back is because we never did a Lauren Avedon movie in the original run of the Action Cast. And if you don't know who Lauren Avedon is, it's because he, in his own mind, to read different accounts, he thought he was the next Van Damme, basically, except he's a bad actor, and apparently he had like a legendarily bad attitude and was notoriously hard to work with. But he could kick people real good. And you watch these movies, this movie with him has no budget. It's a tiny movie. It wasn't canon, I don't think, but it was one of those small, direct to VHS distributors that maybe it had a theatrical run very briefly, but it's a straight to video action movie. But like the action sequences and the fights in that movie is like a million times better than almost anything being made now that doesn't involve, Keanu Reeves or a bunch of Indonesian actors. It was baffling. Like to see, they hold on a medium wide shot for like almost 30 full seconds while he kicks like 5 people in the face. And you're like, how is this possible? It looks like they didn't spare a dime in this movie to like feed the actors, and somehow they had enough time and money to shoot these extensively choreographed martial arts sequences with long shots and long takes. And it's a bummer. I think it's unfair that Greengrass like totally gets that dropped at his feet. Cause like you said, Bryce, I think there's a lot going on there.
It's just, yeah. And once again, I like that Ethan wanted to do this, talk about how shitty these films are. And I'm going to slightly end up defending them here, but it's always a question of intent. So with Greengrass's things, like he's obviously.
I'm not talking about how shitty they are. I thought the first two were really good.
Okay,
the first one is the car chases in the first one, right?
Yeah, well, I feel like before we get into this, Lindman directed the first one, Greengrass did the next two.
Right.
But anyway, the point is that Greengrass was using the shaky cam style in a very direct way, and whether that was at first to mask the fact that, to quote Seth Rogen, that Damon was a bit of Streisand or whatever, but like it was very much a, things are happening in a very chaotic way, but they're building this momentum, and now you have to watch this character kind of like deal with that. It was about putting you in this character's headspace where shit's coming at him faster than he can process to it, but he's just reacting to it. Like, everyone from Taken onward was just like, hey, people like shaky cameras, and like just took the wrong lessons from it and just made shitty action scenes. So, once again, like I'm an old school Arturist 20th century man, so it's just I have a feeling that if you do something in a movie for a reason, it's usually going to work. If you do something in a movie for no reason, it's probably not going to work. So artistic intent is fucking important occasionally. So
I think that if the thing that you're doing in the movie is a penis chainsaw, then it doesn't matter what your intent is.
Right.
Because the penis chainsaw kind of rules either way? Is that what you're...
It's always going to work.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where we should end this.
That is where we should end this. Okay. Well, in that case, unless anybody has a dissent to that's where we should end this, we're going to end that here. This has been the Action Cast. I'm Joe Drilling, and for Bryce Wilson, Ethan Chang, and Anthony Rogers, thank you for watching, and we'll be back next month with something. Something.
Some
We'll be
sort of
back with
cat.
something. Yes, cats.
Yes. Cat.
Jellicle
Black
cats.
Cat. Well, guys, if you can't,
Bye.
I'm fucking exhausted. So, good
Bye.
hang.